Hi, everybody. It's your favorite English teacher here, Amy Joy, and I have a question for you. Would you say, could you tell me what time is it? Or would you say, could you tell me what time it is? Which one would you say? Hmm. Well, let's answer that question today by talking about noun clauses. So, which one of these is correct? Number one, could you tell me what time is it? And number two, could you tell me what time it is? What do you think? Well, if you said number two, you are correct. And this lesson is going to teach you why by talking about noun clauses. So let's try this one more time. Which sentence is correct of the following three sentences? Number one, what did the chancellor say shocked the university? Number two, the researchers wondered what the cause of the explosion was. And number three, the professor asked the students why were they late? Which one do you think is correct? Well, if you said number two, then you are right. The researchers wondered what the cause of the explosion was. Let's take a look at these other two sentences and figure out what is wrong with them. So number one, what did the chancellor say shocked the university? We would actually need to say, what the chancellor said shocked the university. And the next one, the professor asked the students why were they late? And the correct version is the professor asked the students why they were late. So why are these wrong? These all have to do with noun clauses and the word order within noun clauses. So let's take a look at these two sentences. We have number one, the chancellor's statement shocked the university. And number two, what the chancellor said shocked the university. So what's the subject in the first sentence? What do you think? And what about in the second sentence? What the chancellor said shocked the university. Well, in the first sentence, we have the chancellor's statement. The statement is the subject, and it is a single word. It's a single noun. In this sentence, we have a whole clause being used as the subject of the sentence. What the chancellor said shocked the university. That entire clause is the subject of the sentence. So today's video, we're going to talk about different noun functions, noun clause word order, some common mistakes when using noun clauses, and then we'll do a little bit of practice. So let's start off with the functions of different nouns. There are 5 common noun functions, which include the subject. For example, happiness is determined by our mindset. Happiness is the subject of the sentence, and it is a single word noun. We have an object of the preposition. So I did my presentation on happiness. On is your preposition, and happiness is your object of the preposition, and it is a single word noun. We have direct objects. So we studied happiness in my psych course. What did you study? You studied happiness. That is the direct object. And again, happiness is a single word noun. Nouns can be used as an indirect object. Try to give your partner a happy life. Who are you giving a happy life? Your partner. That is the indirect object and a single noun. Nouns can also be used as a predicate nominative. Predicate nominative is just a very fancy word to mean a noun in the predicate or a noun after the verb. So here we can see the focus of positive psychology is happiness. Is your verb, and happiness is coming in the predicate, or it is a noun after the verb. But again, a single word noun. So when we start to use noun clauses, keep in mind that noun clauses can function in any of these 5 ways that nouns do. So typically, nouns are single words, right? And then noun clauses can actually replace these single words. So let's look at some examples. And again, we've got our 5 noun functions. I put fun in pink because noun clauses and the 5 noun functions are super fun. But here we've got it as the subject. How we feel is determined by our mindset. Notice how we're using a clause as the subject of the sentence. It can be used as an object of the preposition. I did my presentation on how we can feel happier. How we can feel happier is an entire clause acting as the object of the preposition. Noun clauses can also be direct objects. We studied how we can be happier in my psych course. We studied what? How we can be happier. That whole clause is the direct object. They can also be used as an indirect object. Try to give whoever you marry a happy life. So who are you giving a happy life? Whoever you marry, the indirect object. And again, as a predicate nominative, the focus of positive psychology is how we can be happier. How we can be happier is an entire noun clause acting as the predicate nominative. So let's just do a little comparison with nouns as subjects. And you can see again what I mean by noun clauses taking the place or acting as an entire noun. So here in 1 through 5, we have single nouns as subjects. Number 1, the game is after dinner. 2, one's home country often dictates one's first language. 3, choosing your major is a big decision. 4, ESL class is very helpful. 5, your registration time can determine what classes you get. So all of these subjects are basically single word nouns. And let's take a look at the comparison. So in number 1, we have when I study best is after dinner. When I study best is an entire noun clause acting as the subject of the sentence. Number 2, where you are born usually dictates your first language, a noun clause acting as the subject. 3, whether you take a gap year or not is a big decision. Again, we're seeing lots of words, a whole entire clause being used as the subject. Number 4, what I learned in ESL class was very helpful. And number 5, when you have your registration time can determine what classes you get. So again, we can see here just in one function, nouns functioning as the subject, noun clauses can be used in any place where you would find a noun. So how do you make a noun clause? We definitely have to focus on word order, and this is one of the hardest parts of making noun clauses and using them correctly. So here's our last example. It said, when you have your registration time can determine what classes you get. So what do you notice about the word order? We have the word when, we have you, which is like a subject, we have, which is a verb, your registration time is an object. It's looking much like statement word order. And in noun clauses, we do use statement word order, but we do use it also with a question word at the beginning. So look, we have question word when, subject you, verb have, object your registration time. So making sure that you're always using question word, SVO word order when you use a noun clause. All right, so as we've said, our sequence for noun clause word order will be a question word, subject, verb, and an object. And that can function in any place where a noun exists. You will notice that I have put the S for subject in parentheses and the O for object in parentheses, simply because they do not always appear. Sometimes your question word will function as the subject, and sometimes you will not have an object because it is optional. So just be aware of that. Also, the question words that we frequently use with noun clauses include who, what, where, when, why, how, whoever, whatever, whether, and if. But we also use the word that. That is super common in noun clauses. And although it is not technically a question word, we are going to call it a question word for the sake of this presentation. So let's take a look at an example. When I study best is after dinner. We have our question word when, our subject is I, and our verb is study. When I study best is after dinner, and that is acting as the entire subject. 2, where you are born usually dictates your first language. So our question word is where, our subject is you, and our verb is are born. And again, that is acting as the subject. 3, whether you take a gap year or not is a big decision. Whether is our question word, you is our subject, take is our verb, and take what, a gap year or not, is your object. And number 4, what I learned in ESL class was very helpful. What is your question word, I is your subject, learned is your verb, and then in ESL class is your prepositional phrase, and we will just call that the object. And that again is acting as the entire subject. So let's look at another example. And this is an example of when you can see the question word acting as the subject itself. So the sentence says, whoever came late missed the introduction. So whoever here is acting as the subject and the question word. So that's okay if you don't always have a new word as your subject. So whoever came late. So came is your verb and whoever came late is your entire noun clause. What happened last week was historical and unprecedented. So again, we have what, and that is kind of acting as your question word and your subject. So we don't have an additional word for the subject, but that's okay. What happened last week was historical and unprecedented. Question word, acting as the S and a V. 7, when you have your registration time, can determine what classes you get. Question word is when, you is your subject, verb is have, and your registration time is your object. Again, all of that acting as the subject. All right, and if you remember back to the very beginning of this video, we have number 8. Could you tell me what time it is? And this one's kind of interesting because we have our noun clause as the direct object. So could you tell me what time it is? And again, we have that question word. And in this case, what time is your entire question word? So it's 2 words, it's a little confusing. What time is your question word? Subject is it, and your verb is. So following that question word, subject, verb, word order, because your noun clause is acting as a direct object. So just a reminder too, remember that noun clauses are replacing single word nouns. So whenever you're using a noun clause, you are going to have a verb, but don't forget that within the bigger sentence, you are also going to have another verb. So don't worry if you have a couple verbs in your sentences, that is okay. Let's take a look at some of these examples that we've already seen. So this one, what I learned in ESL class was very helpful. So we have one verb here, and we have our second, bigger verb in the whole context of the sentence was there. So when you have your registration time, you have a lot of words here, but you also have your second verb, can determine. This one, what happened last week, was historical. So again, you have your verb within the noun clause, but you have your main verb in the big sentence here. And whoever came late missed the introduction. Again, you've had a verb here, but you need to finish your sentence with the verb here. So some students get a little confused because they feel like they have so many words within their noun clause, but then they also have another verb. So don't worry, that is correct. So I'm going to cover 2 common mistakes that I see when students are using noun clauses. And the first big mistake is using question word order and those do and be verbs. Now this totally makes sense because usually when students see a question word, a who, what, where, when, why, they immediately think, okay, invert the word order, switch the word order because I have a question word. However, noun clauses are not questions. They again are just noun clauses functioning as nouns. So from number 1, what did the chancellor say shocked the university? We need to get rid of that question word order, take out the did, and just say what the chancellor said. Number 2, I didn't hear what was the answer. What was the answer is the noun clause. And so you cannot use question word order. You would have to say, I didn't hear what the answer was. And again, this noun clause is functioning as an object, a direct object. I didn't hear what the answer was. Number 3, again, could you tell me what time is it? We need to fix our word order. Could you tell me what time it is? Number 4, our class talked about how did the Romans conquered much of Europe? And instead of using did in that question word order, we need to say how the Romans conquered much of Europe. The second big mistake is using the word that with another question word. So that how, that what, those kinds of constructions. So for example, today I learned that how I should use noun clauses. Not quite. Today I learned how I should use noun clauses. 2, our technology course discussed that how iPhone batteries are made. We need to say our technology course discussed how iPhone batteries are made. Number 3, the video is about that what a business letter includes. And we need to say the video is about what a business letter includes. Number 4, he applied that what he learned to the case study. And instead you need to say he applied what he learned to the case study. So don't forget to use statement word order, and also don't use double the question words, no, that, how, that, what. Just choose one, and that will be good. So to end our little presentation today, let's do some error correction. So I will give you 7 sentences, and I want you to pause your video, maybe write your answers down, and then on the next slide, I will go with you and go over how to correct these one by one. And we're back. So number 1, it says the author shows the audience, why do international students be silent? And our answer, our correction, is the author shows the audience why international students are silent. So that question word why, international students is your subject, are is your verb. Number 2, I asked him what video games does he play in his free time? And our correction would say, I asked him what video games, that's your question phrase. He is the subject, plays is the verb, in his free time a prepositional phrase, and so we'll use the object there. Number 3, in my world history class, we read about that how the Romans conquered much of Europe. And in my world history class, we read about how the Romans conquered much of Europe. So again, how is your question word, the Romans is your subject, and conquered is your verb. Conquered what? Much of Europe is your object. Number 4, what did surprise me the most was he was very curious about my culture. Our answer would be what surprised me most. So what is kind of acting as your question word and the subject. Surprise is your verb, me is your object. Most was, and then interestingly, we have another noun clause acting as the predicate nominative, but there was nothing wrong with this section. It just says was that he was very curious about my culture. That is our question word. He is the subject, was is the verb. And so it's kind of cool to see a noun clause acting as the subject. Then you just have the little verb was, and then you have another noun clause acting as your predicate nominative. So these are very common, and you can definitely have more than one noun clause in a given sentence. So that's good to know. Number 5, this article helps me figure out what should I do now to adapt to American life. And instead we need to say, this article helps me figure out what I should do now to adapt to American life. So that question word, subject, verb. Number 6, we were talking about music. So I asked her what kind of music does she like the most? And here we can see that kind of question word order. We'll need to say, so I asked her what kind of music. That is kind of your question word, question phrase, I guess. Question word, she is your subject, likes is your verb. And last one, I have also experienced that what the main character went through in the book. And you would say, I have also experienced what is your question word, the main character is your subject, went through is your verb, kind of a phrasal verb, and then in the book is an object. So now that we've learned some of the mistakes that happen with noun clauses, how to correct them, in the comments, I want you to use a noun clause to tell me what is something you read today. For example, today I read that the president was banned from all social media. Today I read what? That the president was banned, a noun clause. And another option you can say in the comments is, what is something you are confused about? About is a preposition, so you can follow that with a noun clause acting as the object of the preposition. So you might say, I am confused about why we use statement word order in noun clauses. Something like that. So again, tell me what you read today, or tell me something you are confused about, trying to use noun clauses in your answers. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope this was helpful. If it was, make sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you next time.